Out of the top 20 official 303 results, 17 use XCrosses. The XCross is one of the most necessary concepts to master when aiming for sub 8 and beyond. Pro solvers often are able to plan multiple XCrosses and multiple cross plus ones, evaluating many factors such as ergonomics, efficiency, and transition between planned and unplanned. Now, it may seem like you either have this skill or you don't, but like any skill, being able to balance all these things is something you can train and get better over time through slow solves and careful practice. Today we're going to be discussing the techniques that are usually used in XCross solutions, as well as analyzing the solving styles of This channel is now sponsored by SpeedCube Shop. Use code NOTME to get 5% off of your SpeedCube Shop order. In this video, for every case that I set up on the Rubik's Cube, I will also show the scramble I used to set up the case. Before I show you the solution I'm hinting at, I recommend you pause the video, try the scramble yourself, and try and find a good XCross solution. Then play the video and compare your solution to my solution. This type of XCross is by far the most simple of them all. When solving F2L, if you notice that a corner or edge is solved in its F2L slot and its respective edge or corner is in the top layer, then you can do a D move and insert the unsolved piece without disrupting the solved piece. Doing this is only possible if you have another unsolved F2L slot, but it is much faster than inserting it normally. I go more in depth in part 0 of the series. So if we inspect and solve a cross, and see during inspection that one of the F2L pieces will be solved, we can track the other piece and have ourselves a very easy first pair. The thing is, most cross solutions end with a D move, and keyhole solutions start with a D move. That means that we can cancel these two moves and get a really efficient XCross. By understanding this, we can begin to favor and actively look for cross solutions that have solved corners or edges. Let's make this concept feel a bit more concrete by going through some examples. So in our first case, we have two solved cross edges and two unsolved cross edges. We can solve it in two ways. We can either insert this orange cross edge first and then this blue cross edge, or we can insert this blue cross edge and then this orange cross edge. Either way will work. If we insert this blue cross edge first and then this orange cross edge, you may notice that this block will actually get preserved. If we insert this orange cross edge and then this blue cross edge, it will be broken up, but if we insert this blue cross edge and then orange cross edge, it will be preserved. Now we can track this F2L edge, which matches with this F2L corner, while we do these two moves. None of our moves affected, so we know that immediately after solving our cross, we can immediately transition into inserting this edge. So our full XCross solution would look like this. Now we have two slightly more complex examples. Here we can see a common pattern with most keyhole XCrosses where you solve a corner first, where you have this sort of corner and edge block that you can preserve while making the cross. So here, the cross solution that would best preserve this block would be to first do a D prime, insert this green edge relative to this blue edge, then this orange edge, and then sledge this red edge in, but not like this because that would break this corner and edge pair up. Instead, you would insert it like this, and that would preserve this corner. Now that we know that the cross solution that we will use, we can track our edge that corresponds to this corner, use actually a very advanced method of tracking it, which is by keeping track of its edge orientation. So as you can see with this edge, you cannot solve it using only R and U moves. That's because it's actually a poorly oriented edge. If you've seen a ZZ tutorial or you know ZZ, then you know what I'm getting at. How you can tell an edge is oriented is if this sticker color matches this sticker or the opposite sticker color. So this is red, which means that it's not an oriented edge. And that means that you will have to use F moves or B moves to solve this. But if you were holding it like this, then this would be an oriented edge because here, as you can see, this matches. By knowing whether your edge is oriented or not oriented, you can see whether you're going to have to rotate or not rotate in order to insert the edge. So here, for the time being, it is oriented. We can sort of look ahead and think, okay, when we're going to insert these two, we're going to be using R, B, and D moves, which do not affect this at all. We're going to first do a U prime move, which moves this over here. And when sledging this in, the initial R prime move won't affect it, but the F move will move it over here. And then, since we did an F move on it, now it's an oriented edge. And then our R move will move it up here. So it will go like this. So U prime moves it here, R prime, F to move it here, R. And now notice that it's oriented because we did an F move on it, which means that now we can insert it without rotating. Now here we have a similar case when it comes to XCross solutions, which is that here you can see this very nice pattern. When you insert this edge will also be solved. So by inserting this, you've solved this. Now we can notice that its respective corner is over here. So in order to have a keyhole XCross that is effective, we want to somehow move this corner into the top layer. Right now it's kind of in an awkward position because it's attached to these two cross edges, which usually means that it's going to end up in the bottom layer, which we do not want. So there are two ways that we can solve this cross. One is by first inserting this orange edge and then inserting these two, which is really bad because this ends up being in the bottom layer. However, if we first insert these two, we'll notice that by inserting this orange edge into the cross, we actually bring this corner into the top layer, which makes this a great case for keyhole. And then we can just go from there. Now the thing that is exceptionally helpful with keyhole is that you can very easily adjust your solution to have the most ergonomic cross to F2L transition. First off, because of how simple these solutions usually are, it actually won't be too difficult to plan your second pair. And using this knowledge of your second pair, you can do all sorts of stuff. Say we have this XCross case, where we finish with a D. So here we have this solved corner edge block, so we can very easily create a cross with a corner solved, and then solve its respective edge, like so. Now there are two things that are wrong with this solution, because the second pair requires a rotation. Rotations take up a lot of time when you start really getting this fast, so you only want to rotate when absolutely necessary. The second thing is that you've solved the XCross in the front. Generally, you don't want this, as it restricts visibility of the open F2L slots, reducing look ahead, and almost guarantees that you will have to rotate later in the solve. This is really bad. We can fix both of these issues by doing a wide U move instead of a D move. This wide U move places the solved pair in the back left and allows you to quickly transition to doing this F2L pair. Of course, you may be forced to choose between these two perks of not rotating and better look ahead. Let's say you have a case like this, where this pair is your planned second pair, and this is your XCross. If you do a wide U move, you will have to rotate anyway to do this second pair. But if you don't do a wide U move, your front left slot will be filled up. When forced to choose between no rotations or better look ahead, you want to choose no rotations, since once again, rotations take up a lot of time, more time than a brief hesitation would. As a note, a common theme throughout the rest of this video will be planning your XCrosses so that the transitions between XCross to the second pair is as optimal as possible. This concept is an extension of the keyhole XCross. If you have a cross solution that manages to solve both an edge and a corner, but they are part of different F2L pairs, don't worry. With PseudoSlotting, you can easily solve the other two pieces, and voila! You have a double XCross. If you want a tutorial on PseudoSlotting, I'll link it in the top right. Now, pseudo F2L pairs are very hard to recognize, especially given that you are looking for two very specific F2L pieces. As a result, I will recommend that you should always be able to inspect the pseudo F2L pair in inspection, meaning that in essence, you should have planned a full two pairs. Now, Max Park actually uses this technique a lot in his solves. For example, from his world record 508 average, we have this example where first he sees this block, which he's going to preserve throughout his cross solution. And he notices that he can first insert these two. And then he notices this very nice block that if he does an R2, that actually solves this edge along with this respective cross edge. And then he can insert this and we have two pieces pretty much already solved. That means we can track the F12 pieces that match these two pieces during the cross solution that we just came up with to see what our pseudo pair will look like. So here we can see that this matches with this matches with this. So these are the two F12 pieces that we want to look for. This F move will affect this piece but not this piece. This L move will not affect any of our pieces. So far we have our corner down here and our edge over here. And then we're going to do an R2 move, which moves this over here and moves this from here to here. So we're going to have our two F12 pieces here and here. And then doing a D, L2D doesn't affect these two pieces. So if you couldn't visualize it from me saying it, I definitely recommend you try the scramble and try and visualize and predict it yourself. It might take a few minutes, depending on your skill level. This is essentially what we have visualized so far. We also want to pay attention to the position the cross is at. So here we can see that we have red in front, blue over here. So the slot that our corner has to go into will be over here, and the slot that our edge has to go into will be over here. So they've already been positioned on top of one another, which means that we can just solve this pseudo F12 pair and then do a U wide move to get both of these F12 pairs in the back without having to do any D adjustments. And then if you watch part 0, you will actually recognize that we actually have a very nice multi-slotting case here, and then OL, PLL. This is another max solve that I want to look at. And here we can see that if we insert our 4 cross edges in a very specific order, we will have a solved edge and a solved corner. So first we would insert this edge and then this edge. We have this corner edge block, so we have to insert this orange edge first as to preserve this corner edge block. And then we can insert these two pieces, and we actually have a solved red and blue edge and a solved green and orange corner. So we want to look for the pieces that are assigned to these, which end up being these pieces. Now the thing is, this has to go over here and this has to go over here. So in order to solve these two pieces as a pseudo player, we have to bring these two slots together with a D move like that. And then we can solve this pseudo pair like so. And now we have a double XCross. For this scramble it like this if you want it forced on white cross. Here we see we actually have a very nice pattern over here where we have this corner and edge block, as well as this pattern where if we insert this edge, we actually solve this edge. So we have both of the things that we need in order to form a double XCross. So we can first insert this, and then notice that the two pieces that we're looking for will be our green and orange and our blue and orange, which end up being here and here. So then we're going to insert this orange edge down here, which pushes this over here. Now we can turn our attention to this edge, and we can see that when we insert this red edge, this actually gets solved. So all we really have to do is solve this edge, and that's actually something that Max Park notices and takes advantage of, because he can just very efficiently insert this corner in, and then he gets a double XCross pretty much for free. Of course, as always, ergonomics is always a big thing to watch out for. As always, you can manipulate your D moves to become U wide moves to avoid rotations. For example, in Cubehead's 100 Solutions to 1 Scramble video, Max Park and Timon Klosinski approach the scramble in the same way but do different solutions. Max Park does a normal pseudo XCross, and unfortunately has to rotate during the solution, which costs him a lot of time and fluidity. But Timon does a slightly less efficient and more ergonomic solution, which allows him no rotations during the entire XCross. When solving a cross, you may come across or assemble some very useful patterns that you can quickly and easily transform into an XCross. Here are some of them. So the first case is when you have a cross edge and this free pair. If you do the cross normally while preserving this free pair, you would have to rotate and then insert it. We can do much better than that. Instead, what we can do is R prime, U wide, R prime, U wide prime, R prime. And that actually solves this block. This is what I call the R2 insert. Basically, if you have a pattern that looks like this, where you have two almost adjacent 2x1s where this edge is solved and this corner edge pair is solved and this corner matches with this edge, then you can actually solve both these pieces by doing a U prime R2 U R2. And then that actually creates a square that solves both of these. Here, the solution could probably be to first sledge this in, do an R2 U2 R2, and then insert this orange edge. These next two cases are what I call the sledge block inserts. And here you can see that in each of these cases, we can either insert like this or like this. However, in this case, if we do a D prime and then sledge this in like so, instead of sledging it in like this, we actually preserve this edge, which is already solved. So if you see an edge that is already solved and you notice that sledging your cross edge in will unsolve it, you can just do a sort of E move and then insert it. Similarly here, if we just sledge this in while preserving this corner, this edge won't be solved. However, if we attach this edge to its respective centerpiece, and notice that when we sledge this in like so, this edge will move from here to here, which means that it ends up being solved. So instead of just sledging it in like this, we can sledge it in like this. Something else you can look out for is if you have this sort of almost square, but this center is just out of place. Solve the other cross edges while preserving this, and then insert this pair into the back, and then sledge this in. I'm going to show that from this angle. Insert it, and then sledge it in. And that will actually create an XCross for you. Finally, here's one last case that you want to look for, where you have this pair, and what you might be tempted to do would just be to do something like this, which preserves this pair. But sometimes breaking the pair is actually the wisest choice. If you do an F2 from this angle, and then sort of do a pinching inserting motion like so, then you'll notice that you actually have a one move sort of solved pair. You've essentially broken this pair up, but you've solved both of these pieces into their respective places. So definitely play with this, try and get the hang with it, because it's definitely the weirdest one out of these all. As with the rest of these techniques, you can use them to make pseudo XCrosses where you have an edge and a corner solved, and from there build a pseudo double XCross. If you want to find more of these on your own, just do cross +1 on a 3x3, and then start fooling around with some random 3-move triggers. If you find an interesting pattern that you think would be useful in a solve, then use it, memorize it, and become familiar with it. So now let's take a quick detour and talk about Skewb. Skewb is by far the hardest event to one-look. Skewbers don't one-look by tracking pieces through every single move. No, they memorize patterns that they can later use in solutions. For example, with this scramble, all that a Skewber has to know is that it's one move to this pattern. And this pattern flips these two corner pieces and switches this pair of edge pieces and this pair of edge pieces. We can do the same thing for 3x3. Just by memorizing some common cross patterns, we can learn how to track F2L edges very easily and very optimally. The first cross-making trigger that I'm going to direct your attention to is the sledge. The sledge is actually super simple. First of all, you're going to notice that everything else is pretty much preserved. This block, so if your pieces are anywhere over here, they're going to stay in the same place after doing a sledge. You want to notice that this edge will move over here, this edge will move over here, this edge will flip and move over here, and for corners this will move over here, and this will move over here, and then this will move over here. So applying this to a real example, we're going to track these two pieces, and from experience, I know that this corner will move over here once I sledge this in. So I can immediately cancel into finishing this pair. Another such case looks like this, where these two cross edges are set up so that you can just do R'(F) to insert both of them. This is a case that you want to set up a lot during your cross solutions, but as for tracking pieces, you'll notice that this entire 2x2x3 doesn't move at all. Really, we have 3 blocks that move, but stay preserved mostly. This entire 2x3 moves up, this moves down and over here, so this moves from here to here, and this 2x3 moves back. So if we're tracking, say, these two pieces, we know that this entire block will move over like this way, so this will move over here, and we know that this entire block will move down here, so this will move over here. Another such case is this, which I call the super sledge, which goes like this. So something you might notice is that this pair will actually be preserved and inserted. So if you have a pair that goes over here and it's solved already here, then you can actually cancel into inserting this. This 2 square will go up here, this entire 2x3 will move here, and this block will be preserved and move down here. And then finally, this one piece will actually flip in its position, so it will twist like so in its position. The unique properties of this one actually make it really good for XCrosses. So here, what I could do is just do something like that, and that would preserve this F12 pair. But since we know if this F12 pair is here, it will be preserved and inserted into this slot where it should be, we can move this F12 pair up here and solve an XCross like so. Here we actually have 3 cases where we have a cross edge over here and we want to do a demove and then insert it. And something you want to notice is that this cross edge has to go over here, and we actually have a sort of F12 pair that will attach itself to this cross edge and be inserted along with this cross edge. So this is actually a way that we can solve sort of corners into the cross very easily. If we have something like this, we can insert it like so and then solve it into the cross. Just an example here, we have this sort of pseudo F12 pair here, and if we do a D2, then these two would actually match, and when we insert it, this edge would actually go into the correct place. So we can just memorize, oh, this goes over here. Finally, we have the R2 setup, which is pretty much the exact same thing as this, just with an R2 instead of an F. So again, we have 3 blocks. This 2x2x3 is stagnant. This moves up like this moves 180 degrees like this, and this moves down here. These tricks can all be used to very intuitively solve edges and solve corners to make X-crosses and pseudo X-crosses. And you can couple these techniques with the keyhole techniques that I mentioned before. A lot of the techniques that I've taught you have been pretty straightforward. However, in a lot of cases, building efficient X-crosses won't be as straightforward. I'm sure you're familiar with the feeling of watching a reconstruction and thinking, how the hell did they think of that? Block building as a concept is ridiculously difficult and takes years to master, but it can also become much easier if you do it with strategy. What would you say if I gave you this scramble and I asked you to build an X-cross from it? You would likely have a difficult time. But what if instead I gave you this scramble? You would likely have a much easier time making an X-cross on this. So the real problem is getting from point A to point B. How can I turn a relatively mid-scramble into a golden scramble with a free square? Well, there are often 3 steps to building a square. The first step is to build a pair. There will often be a 1-move pair just hanging out somewhere on the cube, which makes this first step really easy. If there isn't a 1-move pair that's readily apparent, then it's probably in your best interest to just do a normal cross. Then, after taking note of the colors on this pair, that it's a green and orange pair, you want to find the green and orange edge and connect it to the green centerpiece. The reason that we're connecting it to the green centerpiece instead of the orange centerpiece is because green is sort of the color that's longest on this F12 pair, whereas orange only occupies 1 square here. Finally, you want to bring these two 1x2 blocks together, and you have a free square. Now, the order of these first 2 steps doesn't matter. If it ends up being easier to join the edge to the center before making the pair, then do that. And if you think about it like that, then there ends up being a much better way to solve this pair so that it's in a really good place to attach it to this square, just like this. This square can be used in two ways. You can either think of it as an F12 pair connected to a cross edge, or a corner connected to two cross edges. If you think about it as the first case, then it's as simple as preserving the square while making your cross. And voila, you have your XCross. This is definitely easier said than done, and you will often have to adjust and do weird cross solutions to take advantage of squares. If you think of it as the second case, then you preserve the square while making the cross, and now you have a keyhole XCross where you can insert the edge that corresponds to this solved piece, which is over here. And then now you have a solved XCross. Generally, it is easier to use the second technique since both of the edges in the square are cross edges that you will have to solve anyway, and squares like this are much easier to preserve. Squares can be created either before you begin with the cross solution or during the cross solution. For example, in this Tymon-Kolesnitzky solve, you might notice that there's a one move pair here. Sure, we could create the square even before beginning the cross solution, but if we do a D prime move beforehand, we can use this L move to connect this pair and to insert this cross edge into the bottom. Then he's just going to solve this cross piece. Then he's going to solve this cross piece, which connects this edge to its centerpiece, so that when he does this, we have a square down here. And then he can do a keyhole XCross like that. The next solve that we're going to look at is this solve, where there's actually a two move square right here, but it leaves a lot of stuff in some very weird places. He instead begins solving the cross. Now after doing a few moves, he notices that we can insert these two pieces, like so, and then he notices that by doing that, we've positioned this block one move away from this block, which is much better for us, because that means that we can just very easily do that one move, solve the remaining cross edge, and bam, we have an XCross in the back. Something to note in both of these Tymon-Kolesnitzky solutions is that he used R, F, and L moves to make the squares, but then he tactfully used D moves to move the squares into the back, which is much better for his look ahead. Finally, if the square takes more than 3 or 4 moves to make, then it's likely not worth making it. At the end of the day, it's better to do a 3 move cross and an 8 move pair, as opposed to an 11 move XCross. So first, we're going to begin with this Toine Deulemond solve. He notices that we actually have this pattern over here where we have a one move pair that we could solve. So we could create a square with this, like that, and then insert it like this. However, this sort of F move stuff is really weird for execution. Toine opts for a more keyhole XCross solution instead, where he first solves this square, and then inserts this edge like so, inserting this edge into the back using an R'(U')R insert, and then uses an F move to finish off the cross. And although this is slightly less efficient, it is much more ergonomic. However, there was actually a bit of a flaw with that solution, which is that if he just inserted like that, he's kind of left with a really terrible choice for a first pair. So instead, he actually goes a bit Felix mode here and notices these two pieces. If he thinks about it like this case, which we learned about in part 0 of this tutorial, he can actually insert this edge with a U2 to pair these two pieces up. So he does that, he inserts this with a U2 to pair this up, and then that lets him have this very easy 5 mover here. So he notices that we have this hook shape pattern and this very nice free pair that he's going to use to build an XCross out of. So this solve is actually going to be an example of noticing a very nice pattern. So he's going to go on and solve the cross while preserving this F12 pair. And now he actually notices when we have this square that just solved itself while we were solving this. But if we just solve the cross, this isn't actually going to be the top layer. It's just not going to be in a great place to take advantage of. But instead he notices this free pair in the back. We can just insert this into the back before inserting this cross edge into the cross. And that actually gives us a really nice XCross. So in this scramble, we see two very interesting things. The first thing that we see is just this pattern where if we insert this cross edge into the bottom, this edge is solved. And this pattern, which if we did D, F, we would actually see this corner and edge block get solved, and then you could solve it into the cross like that. So now that we can see that, we want to track the respective edge and corner for those two F2L pieces that we know will be solved. So that will be these two. So he first realizes that after inserting this, or even before inserting this, we can do an R prime U to R to solve this into the back. However, the thing is, just from his experience, he knows that that R2 U to R prime trigger will actually change the orientation of this, and will make it so that once we have done that, we can do a U move and solve this entire 3x1 block. So now, pretty much everything is solved. Our corners are solved and our edges are solved for the back two pairs. All that's left is inserting this piece. And the way that some people would insert it would just be to rotate and do an R wide U prime R wide prime. But he instead opts to do this rotationless. Just do an R U wide R prime after doing a D prime move, and then do another D prime move like that. He did a red cross on this solution, so I'm going to actually force it on white cross by doing a Z rotation. So in this scramble, he notices that we have this solved F2L edge, and we can sledge in this cross edge in order to preserve this solved F2L edge. However, he also notices that we have this pattern over here. We have this corner and this edge. And as we've discussed, if we do a D2L prime, we're actually going to get this solved. However, he also notices we have this edge over here, which we can do a U prime to solve. So far we've solved this piece, and this piece. So all we have to do is solve this piece. And we can solve this right now and then just have a solved double XCross in the back, but maybe there's a better place to solve it in the cross. Before inserting this edge, we have to move this over here, but we can move this over here using this R U prime R prime trigger to insert this corner down here. So by doing that, we've basically killed two birds with one stone, and now we have a super efficient XCross or XXCross. Finally, here we have our most crazy solve yet with Timon Kosinski's 343 that he got on this, and he's going to create a triple XCross. He first notices this one move square that also sets up this pair, and we also have this one move pair. So we have a lot of stuff that we can take advantage of. Then he's going to do a D2, a U prime to finish this one move pair. And he's going to notice that this pair goes with this edge. So we want to solve this edge somehow. He notices that we have this cross edge, which should be sledged in. But if we do a D move and then sledge it in, that will actually solve this edge in its place. But in order for that to happen, of course, you have to insert this without disturbing this edge, which he does like that. Then he's going to do an F move to put this into the cross. Then he's going to sledge this in. And then we actually end up having a free pair. This shows the power of the techniques that we learned about in full force. This is art, pretty much. And now you have the power to make art like this. Anyway, that is it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. This video, again, is sponsored by SpeedCube Shop. I am now sponsored by SpeedCube Shop, which is crazy. So definitely expect some more unboxings and stuff in the future. Love you all. I'll see you next time.